in any research you're going to do about finishing your basement, whatever article or video or post you're going to look at, it's going to tell you, are there signs of water? Make sure you have no water issues, right? Because water is going to destroy everything that you're going to build. You want to make sure that doesn't happen. You're going to put thousands of dollars into this, time, blood, sweat, and tears, the whole 9 yards. One crack, one leak, it's ruined, right? Now you're going backwards to ruin. So you want to make sure that everything's good and in a position to finish your basement. With that in mind, I had a chat with Ben Bates from Advanced Basement Systems here in Ontario to know what are the signs of water in both finished and unfinished basements, what are the common practices to repair these, how long it takes, and all of those questions. And this is the second conversation I've had with Ben, because the first time we chatted, I went totally off the rails and we just talked about how interesting his business was and everything. So Ben is somebody I find very smart and knowledgeable. Advanced Basement Systems has a big YouTube channel with a library of stuff that you can go educate yourself on. Some very interesting stuff. Not all of it applies. They have a system that like straightens your basement walls if they're bowing. So that being said, I want to thank Ben for coming on. I want to thank you for clicking onto this. Good luck on your project and enjoy our conversation. What are the signs of water issues that I may have to call you about getting some waterproofing done in my basement?
Yeah. So unfinished basement, you've obviously got discoloration of like a block wall like this. The blocks at the bottom of the wall are darker. Seepage itself, water coming out where the floor and the wall meet, right? Efflorescence, which is the white mineral substance, kind of doesn't really look like anything. Some people think it's mold, but it's a very sort of like crystallized substance. So that obviously telltale. Finished basements, you have things like wet carpet around the edges, discolored baseboard, right? Like the brown staining, heavy presence of spider webs around things like windows or where the floor and the wall meet. Typically that's where spiders like to hang out in very wet, damp environments. So that's the telltale sign, right? Like there's no water coming through this window despite all the cobwebs. In other places, there's no cobwebs here. They're where all the air leaks are up here, right? Which is into a warehouse that's wet. It's not treated air. So, there you go.
Right.
And yeah, just general damp, smelly, basement musty. That's all indication of mold, which is either because of high humidity or because of water.
Right. And if you have, say, a sump pump that's firing a lot, or you're emptying a dehumidifier a lot, those are definitely sort of easier signs to tell that you've got maybe a moisture issue in and around your basement potentially.
Yeah, some pumps that run a lot are good because they're working, but that, of course, can lead to a flood. So you got to make sure it's in good shape.
Right. What other information should I have with me when I call a waterproofing company? So not just saying, hey, I'd like you to come have a look. I have water issues. I should probably drill down and be a little bit more specific. I mean, in today's day and age, you can take pictures with your phone. What other information should I have? Like, is age of the house matter, or type of house, or location?
I mean, if I were to move and live somewhere else and call a company, I would say this is how old the home is. The basement is either finished or unfinished. I think the water's coming in here where the floor and wall meet, the window, right? Not a lot. Sometimes the water's coming in over top of the foundation, right? We can't.
Okay.
Waterproofers can't fix that. So, establishing that. And just sort of, like let them know what you're hoping to achieve out of the space. And any good contractor, when they come out, is going to tell you, hey, what are you looking to do here, so we can help you best, right?
In one of our other conversations, you made a point to mention when you talk to clients, asking them how often is it wet? Like, what's the frequency? Mm-hmm. Is it a time of year? Is it a specific place? I found that really interesting too. And that kind of educates you as well on where or what the problem may be, correct?
Yeah, I mean, obviously wet basements, they typically leak when it rains. That's often a given, but sometimes that's not. People call and they're like, oh, I had a flood 2 days ago. And it's like, it hasn't rained in 3 weeks. And it's plumbing leaks usually most of the time, right? So, but yeah, people sort of over the years that they live in a home have like it leaks every March and April, typically with that big rain or whatever that we get. But recently in the last years, it's kind of just really whenever the ground is oversaturated, people are having problems. So yeah, there's really no like it leaks that now, so this is what we need. It's just sort of, drainage and sump pumps. That's the two core things of waterproofing. So you got to make sure that both are going to work so that you can have a basement that's dry all the time, not 364 days a year, right?
Yeah. What are the most common sort of problems and repairs that you guys execute?
Block walls that are seeping, having moisture push through them. That's standard. That's drainage systems that are needed. Proper vapor barriers on the walls themselves. Poured foundations, like poured concrete, not block. You have hairline cracks. A lot of the times they come off the corners of a window. Sometimes they go all the way to the top of the wall and come all the way down to the floor. They're just hairline. They're not very big. They're easy to miss. So we fix a lot of those. We do a lot of sump pump replacement, battery backup replacements, full sump systems with discharge lines, emergency exits, secondary discharge lines, all those types of things. Those are the common things that we're doing, as well as high humidity issues for people. We see a lot of, people trying to run 2 or 3 different dehumidifiers at the same time and they're not working. So, having a specialized basement dehumidifier in the home is very important, or crawl space.
And is that something that you can get attached to your furnace, or is that a separate system?
No, they're standalone units, self-draining standalone units. They're not easy to find.
Yeah. You mentioned sort of cracks, right? At what point do I have to just figure out, do I fix it from the inside or from the outside? Or is that a case by case, or is there something I could think about? Or because that's really one of the worries when people get a foundation crack is they're like, oh, I'm going to have to dig up my yard.
Yeah. So we do it from the inside. It works. There's a whole method. You can go to Advanced Basement Systems YouTube page to see like how we fix a crack repair. But at the end of the day, like sometimes you have to fix it from the outside because it goes behind the stair landing. So what do you do? Mm-hmm. But I would say, Bill, like 40% of people who have us fix a crack have had it fixed from the outside before. And then probably 50 to 60% have had it fixed from the inside. But we use a patented solution, right? What a lot of people see is these epoxy injections where they inject through like a plastic nozzle that's in the wall or a nipple, right? But epoxy is hard. So epoxy hardens, right, once it's cured. And the whole reason that there's a crack in your foundation to begin with is because the foundation shifted. So when it does shift again, the epoxy will crack with it, right? We've all had some example of this that we've seen in the house. So what we use is a textured urethane product with a patented foam strip, but there's more to it than that. But spraying it, painting it, none of this stuff is going to work because you have to remember, right? The water is already through the foundation if you try and fix it from the inside. And then it hits the back of the paint that you bought, and then it just comes out the bottom where the floor and the wall meet. It'll just do that every single time. So if you're going to fix it from the inside, you need to have a proper drain pocket at the bottom, which is a whole thing. And if you're going to fix it from the outside, you have to be 1,000% sure that the wall is cleaned perfectly. Everything is sealed. There's not a chance any water can get in, and there's not a chance that any hydrostatic pressure can push up underneath the footing through the crack at the bottom. A lot of the times, though, the wall is dirty. They're very hard to clean. You got to get an excavator. It's not easy. So I would say do it from the inside if you can.
Yeah, I have a few customers and friends that I know that have done the exterior version, and the longevity of it isn't known yet because they have only done it in the last few years.
Yeah, and we can have a whole hour-long conversation about waterproofing on the inside or damp proofing on the outside and what the benefits are of each.
Right. In terms of time, say you have two projects that you talk about, like the longer project would probably be digging up and installing an interior weeping system, correct?
Versus inside, outside?
Well, versus like just in terms of the how long it takes to fill a crack, how long it takes to do these things, like just the
Oh,
process, so people understand how long they're going to be having somebody
ah, yes.
working on their house, how quickly the problem can be solved.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, so a crack repair usually, like if you're doing it from the inside, is a couple hours, right, to do everything. We say, if you're doing like 100 feet of 100 linear feet of basement waterproofing drainage inside the house with like, a sump pump system, discharge line, a
Mhm.
product on the wall, right, to drain the walls into the interior drainage system. You're going to be like a day and a half for that, right? With a talented
Mhm.
4 man crew. Sometimes 2 days, sometimes one day. It really depends how far they're driving, things like that. Some pump installs, very much like if you're just putting a pump in with a backup, couple hours. If you're actually having a new sump pump, like the pit itself installed, if you live on sand, it can take a really long time to get that liner set in. Um, Typically half a day to a day for something like that. Radon mitigation is something that a lot of waterproofers are sort of trying to tie in. That's like half a day install. But yeah, for basement waterproofing, if you're having a whole basement waterproof from the inside, you could expect the guys to be there from anywhere from 2.5 to 5 days.
Yeah, so you could potentially have your problem, quote unquote, solved in a week, right?
Yeah,
Or
pretty
the
much. Yeah.
resolution in place.
Yeah. And then any bag of concrete will tell you to let the concrete cure for 90 days before like refinish over it in this case with your kick plate and things like that. But at the end of the day, yeah, you could say like
Right.
from really bad wet basement to dry basement, ready to finish, 6 weeks is a reasonable amount of time to let all that concrete cure and such.
Or is there a specific era of house that would draw you more or less concern if somebody were to call, in that preliminary conversation, and when they tell you how old their house
Mm-hmm.
is there a reaction you have to a certain era of house?
Yeah. 40s, 50s are a strike zone for problems. Likely has a problem that we can fix. 60s, 70s likely has a problem with asbestos that we can fix. Right? And then
Okay.
80s, 90s, you start to get into like better construction. Um, they don't have as many problems, but they still have problems. And then the 20s and the 30s are like prepare to have a bit of it. It takes more work a lot of the time because there's just things that are
Yeah.
retrofitted incorrectly. So yeah.
You've probably had multi generational renovations done
Oh
to the
yeah.
house, and the construction methods then are not as easy to marry to as our current methods.
Hmm.
It involves a lot of problem solving in sort of any trade, let alone what you guys are trying to achieve, right?
Yeah, and there's like some things, different floor heights, right? If you have a basement floor that's like 6 inches higher than another piece, obviously water flows downhill, so you want the sump pump in the lower area, an elevated dirt crawl space to the lower basement level. Things like that need to be taken into consideration. Remember, water flows downhill. Um, and I would say too, when you have someone quoting your basement, ask them, you know, where they're going to put the sump pump if you don't have one already. If you need one installed, make sure that they find the low point in the basement, and that's where you're going to
Right.
put the sump pumps. We see that happen a lot where people don't
Where they put it in the wrong place.
put it in the high spot. Yeah,
And what is it about wartime sort of 40s, 50s houses that causes problems?
you know, drainage.
All of it.
Yeah, clay tile really wasn't getting used commonly until the 40s at some point, right? So by the time it caught on, you're probably in the 50s already, and most of them are in sections this long. They've got perforations and they clog, they break, right? As you backfill, they break. So until the advent of round plastic corrugated pipe came in, which is equally as useless for basement drainage, the clay pipe just didn't do much. And but it's funny though, because it's like, you go into a house that's built in the 40s, that's great. Yeah, basement leaks, but then the addition on it from 2001 is awful. So from a build quality point of view. So I think at the end of the day, really, it's just they're a product of their era. we were building more basements instead of crawl spaces because we had the
Yeah.
technology, the machinery to dig deeper, but there was really no product. People didn't know, right? I mean, so it was just one of
Would
those
it
things.
be safe to say that it was kind of the beginnings era of having full basements, and then the construction methods hadn't really addressed
Yeah.
having drainage around your foundation?
Yeah,
Right?
I think you're bang on with that because like most houses had crawl spaces where they were, what do they call those, stick and post, um, where it's basically like a deck, that you build your house on
Right.
top of. And yeah, so once, it was cheaper to dig a basement, there obviously was, a mix up, we'll say, with addressing the water that's coming in.
What What are some of the less common signs of moisture? We talked about a few earlier on,
Mm.
right? The easy red flags to tell. What are some of the less common ones? Because I'm gonna get somebody watching this who, what we've touched on, they are in that 1% of the problem that no one gets.
Yeah.
What are some of the less common ones?
Good question. And I want to remind people that there's basement water seepage. Okay, that's water coming through a crack, through the wall, puddles on the floor. And then there's basement humidity. Two different things. So I'm going to talk about both because they're both could be equally as damaging. Of course, just one takes longer. But that musty smell in a basement is obviously a sign that isn't as obvious. We did talk about it, but that's mycotoxin. That's the off-gassing of mold spores. So if you have an unfinished ceiling and the nails or this, in the floor joists, if they're all rusty, that's because they're not galvanized and because there's a high moisture content in the basement. You didn't have a flood that high, right? So that's what that is. That's a good trick, but it is an indication of high humidity. Staining on the header. So the top of the foundation wall has a piece of wood stain on it. That's called the sill plate. And then you have a rim board like that sits on top of that. And rim joist, sorry. And you see discoloration in that. You go outside. I bet you that landscaping is right to that foundation top or just slightly above it. Water's getting over. We talked about that earlier. That's bad. So that's not so common of an indication. Water pushing up through floor cracks, that's a real pain in the butt because sometimes your water issue is because you don't have adequate aggregate, as we say, underneath the basement floor. So that means that when they dug the hole, it was dirt, they leveled it, and they did not pour down stone before they put the concrete slab on top of it. So that means that...
Or potentially it wasn't packed, right?
Or whatever. Yeah, I mean, we've seen all sorts of things. So that concrete is drawing up that moisture. It's very hard to fix that sometimes. That's a less common issue. And then, of course, too, you have like the not anything to do with the foundation waters and basement problems, which is like back water valves, the absence of back water valves or back water valves that haven't been properly maintained, that people don't even realize that they're there. So, you have a big plastic square lid in your basement floor. Well, that's probably a back water valve. Call a plumber and have them service it. So, those are some little things. What else would I say? I would say sump pumps that aren't working. So what happens? Well, there's pipe that feeds into the sump pump that collects the groundwater on the outside of the home, puts it to the sump pump pumps it away. If the sump pump stops working, and most people don't know anything about their sump pump or where it is or what it does, well, what happens? Well, the water level rises, obviously, because it's not getting pumped out, and then it goes not on your basement floor. It goes back into the drainage piping around the footing of the home. And then once that gets filled up, it starts to seep out, and then you get artificial seepage through the wall joint. Mm-hmm. So that's why people.
So you're saying
sump pump failures are often like, and then the wall leaked, and it's never done that. Well, that's why.
Oh, so what you're saying is it doesn't just fill up the sump pump pit. It reaches a water level, and then it maintains that water level throughout the sump system as opposed to evacuating it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes a great volume of water to actually have,
Wow.
goes through the tile, then up the floor. So yeah, but it happens
Yeah.
slowly most of the time
Yeah.
for people, and then all of a sudden, yeah, they've got seepage coming through the walls, and then you open the sump, and it hasn't rained in a month and a half, right?
Wow. That one kind of blew me away there.
Yeah.
I want to touch on one more thing before we wrap this up. You talked about radon and that you guys are radon experts in a previous conversation. I'm going to tell you what, I don't know anything about radon. What is it that we're looking for if I were to, so I have a house from the early to mid 80s. So no radon. That was not part of the sort of lexicon of construction techniques then.
Right.
What would I be looking to do with regards to radon in my house, if I have an older house? Because, I mean, right now, was the last 5-6 years, all the new builds have to have some type of
airtight lid
radon addressant.
Yeah, they call it radon neutral, right? So it's easy to put in a radon system if you need it. So what is a radon system? It's a fan. It's looks like a UFO. It's like this big, and it's got 3-inch pipe on either side. I'm not going to get into the install process. You can look that up. But what you need to do as a homeowner from any era of home is order a radon test kit. They're 90 days long. You put it in an area where you spend the most time, and you tell your kids, don't touch it. It'll burn your fingers off if you touch it. It won't, but that's what you tell them because they'll screw it up. And then after 90 days, you pay to ship it to a laboratory. Ours go to Texas for people because you can buy kits from us and stuff. And then from there, you get the readings. You can also do short-term tests. They're more expensive. You can buy radon monitors. I would just do the 90-day test kit, okay? They're your best way to go. And then from there, a radon expert comes out, and it's like, okay, here's what your house needs to be radon neutral before we actually drill into the floor and depressurize underneath that slab and pull all that ground air out. Because radon is the decay of uranium in the ground, and it's everywhere. But when you build a house over the ground, right, you contain the air. So that's why soil gases, when they build a house over a little dump, which is they don't do that anymore, but all the methane comes through. Radon is the same. It's just colorless, odorless, tasteless. So what happens is we got to make it neutral. So any thick floor cracks in your basement floor, or if you have a dirt floor crawl space, they have to be sealed or encapsulated, right? We can't have any type of interior waterproofing system with the back open so that soil gas is coming out back through there, right? Because these fans suck everything, all that air. So it's going to be drawing out of the already open space. So everything needs to be sealed. And the biggest thing is an airtight sump lid, not a Pac-Man lid where there's a big slit cut out of it, right? And then it goes around. Not like that. They actually need to be airtight. So we have all that stuff. And then once that's done, the pipe gets drilled into the ground. Like I said, I won't get into the details. And then it gets exhausted outside. And it's so our company has a certified radon technician. We have a radon installer, and we have an apprentice. It's not an actual trade, but a guy going through it right now too. So we have 3 people dedicated to it. And you can find videos on Advanced Basement Systems YouTube page of just how any radon system in Canada would get installed because the laws are different in America.
Yeah, you guys have a pretty big library of stuff.
And we're just trying to educate people. This is sort of these are our products, but this is how we fix it.
Yeah. All right. In your opinion, Ben, is there something I should have asked that I did not ask?
Oh man, we kept it under half an hour. We've done pretty good. You keep me going for 2 hours here. I would say I haven't admittedly watched. I
don't mean for you and me, because you and I we get talking, it gets too nerdy. I mean, for an average homeowner, is there something they should know, whether it's radon, waterproofing, sorry to interrupt, but either way, is there something kind of at the top of your mind?
Well, I guess I missed one, which was making sure that if your basement windows are at grade or just below grade, the bottom of them, they probably have a well around them. Make sure that if there's a plastic pipe in that well, that you clear the debris out from around it. Wear gloves because raccoons tend to poo in those areas. It's gross. But that needs to be clear because that feeds into your drainage system. So maintaining window wells, side note, also side topic, those are important. Replacing your window wells is sort of answering your question, like what to look for in a window well, how to
Yeah.
get a good cover. The other thing I would say, and you feel free to talk to me about this anytime, is water powered backup pumps versus battery powered backup pumps. Why people
Right.
use one, why people use the other, and what the issues are with both, and what the answer is for people. So I think like people are now like, you're always going to be spending over $1,000 to have one of these things installed. So what are the differences and why? The last thing I would say is the type of flooring that you're going to use in a basement. I think that's a great subject. There's people who know more about it than me, but I do know enough to say like you need to be careful with what you put on your floor. So yeah.
Yeah, I actually started doing YouTube lives in the last 2 weeks, and a lot of the questions revolve around flooring. I had someone after our initial conversation in the chat ask about breathable carpet underpad, and I was just like, I don't know that I've ever heard of that.
We have breathable
And
carpeting, but it's got a plastic skeleton base. It's not an underpad. So
yeah. Yeah. So it just kind of like carpet is a material at the same time, right? So you may have moisture coming up, but it is probably still going to get trapped in your carpet, right? Because it's a material. It's not a. So I'll got to do a little bit of homework on that. But yeah, I have gotten a lot of questions about that, and I'm probably just going to produce probably a few videos just on basement flooring because it seems to be something people are very interested in.
the thing about flooring is you really want to try to avoid organic material in the flooring. So like plastic skeleton on the base when you put it down on the floor, and then particle board top. That's not good. You don't want anything that can get wrecked by moisture and water. So non-organic flooring is the way to go. And it's not easy to find that. Like we have it, but we don't. It's expensive. So, you know, it's one of those things.
Well, luxury vinyl plank is what most people are putting down.
Yeah. Like, okay,
right?
You're talking to a guy who owns a pretty large basement waterproofing company, and I would never put down laminate, carpet, hardwood, luxury vinyl plank, tile, ever in my basement floor. So,
all right. I guess we'll leave it at that then.
There's stuff out there. You know what, Bill? I'd probably leave it unfinished. Before I built my house, I would put rigid foam down underneath to insulate it, pour my slab, in-floor heating. That's what I would do. Yep. Leave it. Right. Put a rug down.
That's interesting. All right, Ben. I appreciate your time. Thank you for doing this. And I'll probably have questions for you about radon in the future.
We'll do a radon episode. Talk about radon in a basement, radon in a crawl space, how to treat it, and we won't make it too boring, but we can educate people for sure.
Well, I will definitely be reaching out to you to get one of those kits.
Yeah,
because I probably need to do that, and then once I get my head around, do a little bit of homework, then I need to know a little bit more to even know what questions to ask, because I would just be completely like, oh, really? Wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I don't know how many houses you were talking about the sump pump, right? And the lid cover. Well, when I sold my wife and I sold our first house that we bought together 6 or 7 years ago, the house was built in 2011. And one of the things I had to do is replace the sump pump cover with one of these radon rated sump pump covers.
Yeah.
And I was like,
and they're pain.
What is
they're
this?
One piece. You can't get them off the discharge line.
Yeah.
We have answers.
Yeah, it wasn't fun. I think I broke one and then had to buy another.
Probably, yeah. They're not easy. Yeah. They lock in, and then the slab guys cement them in. You can't get them off. Oh my goodness, it's a whole chore. But anyways, we'll have a whole radon piece sometime.
All right, awesome. Thanks, Ben.